I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes now. Both of you gentlemen have done a good job describing the legal architecture of deferred action, at least from the perspective of the agencies. It's a discretionary matter that's conducted on a case-by-case basis, and you don't categorically exempt entire groups, if I'm reading you correctly. But what I don't get is, what is the motivation behind the new policy? What's the rationale for the new policy? And I know some of my Republican colleagues were asking me to relay the same question. Why did all of this happen? Can either of you answer that, Mr. Renaud?
Unfortunately, we are not going to be able to answer that because of the ongoing litigation. We're not able to respond to that today.
What is the new policy as you understand it, Mr. Renaud, because there's so much confusion around it?
Again, because of the litigation specifically encumbers what the current policy is. As you were informed, yes, as the committee was informed last evening by letter, these are areas that we are not going to be able to discuss, that I'm not going to be able to discuss today.
You can't tell me why there's a new policy, you can't tell me what motivated the new policy, and you can't tell me what the new policy is. Is that a correct assessment of the situation?
That is my testimony, sir, yes.
Okay. Let's see. Well, let's say, Mr. Robbins, let me come to you, because I can see that there's an effort to find some shelter for the government in the idea of prosecutorial discretion. What would the prosecutorial benefit be in removing from the country, deporting from the country, a young person who has cystic fibrosis or cancer or another serious disease?
So I think it's safe that we can agree that when it comes to very sympathetic cases, that is exactly what discretion is for. ICE has, in enforcing immigration law, has always used discretion and will always use discretion moving forward.
So what changed? Like, why? I mean, I assume you saw the anxiety and the agony and the pain that these families are going through. What changed?
Well, currently, ICE does not have a process, an application process, or an adjudicated process for affirmative stays of deferred action. We use our prosecutorial discretion from arrest through removal, and then we have the ability to adjudicate stay request, and there's an application process for that process.
And therefore, so what is the answer to my question of what has changed?
I can't speak to the rationale or what has changed in regards to the adjudication of the deferred action request at CIS. I would have to defer that to my colleague.
Okay, would you agree that there's been a change in the mood somehow that produced the writing of these letters?
I can't
okay.
answer that question.
What would need to be done to get Homeland Security just to reverse this whole disastrous road that it went on when it sent out those letters?
Well, one thing, I mean, we are currently having ongoing discussions with DHS about our pathway forward when it comes to deferred action, and we're just not prepared to comment on that. Those discussions are ongoing.
I got you. Well, I appreciate your candor and your honesty about that. Can I just tell you, I know I speak for a lot of colleagues, certainly on my side of the aisle, and I suspect, but I don't want to say for sure on the other side of the aisle, that this really is a moral crisis in the country. I understand that, you know, you've described the numbers of people affected as very few, and in terms of the overall number of people you've got to deal with, I understand that, but it's still 1,000 or more people, and you know, as representatives in Congress, we hear from them and their families, and it's our job to take into account people's real-life situations. So anything that we can do to work with the administration to reverse this and to enter into discussions about new regulation or new legislation to bring greater clarity and transparency to the process, I think you'd find a lot of support here. But the United States of America is a big country. It's a great country, and it's got a big heart. And when the people of America see this kind of testimony, and we know that we're in the very forefront of medical and scientific progress in the world, and people come to America to get their lives saved, and not to get their lives messed up. And I think that's why it's caused such crisis and anxiety, not just in those families, but across the country and in Congress when we see this being done in the name of our people. So let me just ask you finally, when will you be ready to conclude your deliberations with or without our assistance? And when will you be ready to answer our committee about what is the precise policy going forward? Mr. Robbins.
I'd love to be able to give you an answer on when the conversation would conclude. Those conversations are ongoing, and I don't have an answer for you.
Okay. Can you assure us that none of the people that we saw today or people in their situation will be removed from the country until you get back to us with a policy answer as to what the policy is?
Well, I can assure you that when it comes to ICE and our discretion, the people that the population, and Mr. Reno can correct me if I'm wrong, these are affirmative actions for deferred action. They are not in proceedings. They are currently, that is not a population that we currently target, but I do not have an exhaustive list of those people, of actually who has previously applied for deferred action.
And you can assure us, I understand, you can assure us that you're not targeting
I can assure you
anyone in this situation for removal at this point.
I can assure you that enforcing immigration law is a very, very difficult responsibility that ICE does very professionally and with compassion. And this is a very vulnerable population that has never been, we would use prosecutorial discretion on cases very similar to these. I can't speak to these specific cases because I do not have the facts, but I can't assure you that every case that is applied through CIS Deferred Action Program or process would not be removed. I just don't know all the cases.
Okay, well, I appreciate the fact that you're telling me you're not ready really to articulate what the policy is, but I want you to know that we are going to be zealous and diligent as the Oversight Committee in making sure that people in this situation have their rights and their interests considered consistent with the values of the American people. So I would thank you for your testimony, and I recognize now Ms. Presley for 5 minutes of questioning.